that our new members have some idea that whenever we sell land of any kind or property of any kind here for Topeka Public Schools, there has to be some benefit for our kids. It can come in form of scholarships, internships, money for backpacks. I mean, it was whatever is needed at the time and whatever the entity who was purchasing the property can offer. But that has been the case since we purchased the land out, what we call the Kansas property. Every piece of land out there that we have sold since we became the owners, the new owners have been contributing to the educational processes for our kids, and it's a wide variety. And I just think that I thank Mr. Robbins because he's the one that got that going and is keeping it going, but it's going to take every board member every year remembering that that's part of the process and making sure that we find out what that benefit for our kids is going to be, because we ought not to own anything and give anything or sell anything that in some way doesn't benefit the kids. So I would say thank you to Larry.
Dr. Michaels.
Mr. Robbins, wasn't there a benefit to faculty or staff too, potentially?
Yeah, I just remembered I forgot to share that, but there's some adult benefit too, because our employees will receive discounts off of either new or used car purchases. If it happens to be a new car, our employees can receive the equivalent of what is referred to as employee pricing. On a new car, it has to be one that is in stock and available for delivery. Used cars, their best online price will be reduced by another $500 if you happen to be an employee of Topeka Public Schools.
Can it cover board members? Yeah, that's right.
But we're not employees. Thank you very much. Those are just little things that most people in the community are not aware of, and I just want to make sure that all our new board members are clearly aware of how hard we work to make sure faculty and students are benefiting.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you both for bringing that up. So, superintendent's report.
At this time, Ms. Sharp will begin to talk about early childhood. She's coming forward with LaManda Broyle, the lady with endless energy. As all of you all know, we just celebrated her in her most recent award of 20 under 30? 40. Okay, you look young. And Ms. Fairley, who, because of her, for those that don't know, our Parents as Teachers program has a National Blue Ribbon Award, which is quite difficult to get, and she earned that under her leadership. So really, I'll turn it over to these powerful leaders to start off with the presentation.
Good evening. We're excited to share with you this evening some updates regarding early childhood, and to our outgoing board members, we're honored that we get to present at your last meeting. We're going to be going over some just program updates as well as some assessment and curriculum updates. And Ms. Fairley is going to start us off.
So I'll talk to you a little bit about parents as teachers, and you'll have to forgive me because I missed the black and white memo that they had, so I feel a little out of place, but you'll forgive me for that. I just wanted to start off by saying we really appreciate
Mrs. Kirk can't hear you, so you have to speak really loudly into the microphone.
I get that bad. Okay, I really appreciate all of you, and we're so thankful to have such a board that is so behind parents as teachers. We don't always have an opportunity for people to support early childhood, so we really appreciate all of you so much and the support that you've given us over this past several years. So as you know, we have 4 sites. We are now in Shaner, and we are offering playgroups there and plenty of families that are attending. We served 315 children last year. And I want to preface that by saying that we do not have a great way of counting the families that we are serving in our playgroups. And I think people sometimes hear playgroup and they think it's just a time, of course, to go play, but there's so much learning that happens in that. And one of the things that we are trying to do this year is to be very specific about capturing some of those very specific moments that happen with families. For instance, a family I think of that only comes to playgroup, but autism is a concern, and that is a family that may not have been addressed before the child goes to school. So just little things like that. So that's one thing I do want to mention along with that. About almost half of our families are considered, have multiple stressors, are considered high risk that we serve. I will say that across the state with parents as teachers, we're looking at about 10% in most districts at the max. We're looking at about half of our families that are being served twice a month. And I want to say that because that number could double the amount of children that we serve. We could be serving more children, but because we're seeing them more frequently, we don't serve as many children anymore. We partner still with Topeka Housing Authority, with United Way, with the Early Childhood Block Grant, and recently we had a really great partnership with the Topeka Rescue Mission with the Children's Palace. We're still currently serving some families from the Children's Palace that were being served there. And we just recently were able to receive funding from Families First. That is a grant through Kansas Parents as Teachers and DCF to serve families who are at risk for foster care. So some of the highest risk families in our community, we are going to be able to serve with some additional dollars we're receiving from that Family First. And one of the last things is we do coordinate quite a bit with our preschool intervention program to serve families, children, to make referrals for children that need special services, or at risk for special services. So last year, 112 of our children were referred either to Tiny K, which is for children under 3, or for preschool intervention, which is to our children over 3. So we're really working hard within our early childhood program to be able to help transition children from parents as teachers onto preschool and onto kindergarten. And this past year we did that by making sure that we got notes just like they do from our preschool classrooms to kindergarten, or from some of our elementary school classrooms to the next step. We are doing the same thing with parents as teachers and making sure that the information that we know about families is being passed on to their teachers, because we really understand how important it is for us to be a community and to be able to support families in that way.
Okay, at the top of this next slide is just overall demographics for our preschool population of students who are in a TPS classroom. Sheldon Head Start has remained the same, 221 students, 2.3 million still coming in our Head Start grant. We will be rewriting and recompeting for a 5-year grant coming up in this next year. Ms. Norton has expanded partnerships to include Antioch Baptist Church and Western Hills Baptist Church. So those are new partnerships there, and there are also partnerships at Pine Ridge Prep and supporting there as well. We're still serving 51 students at Pine Ridge, and have also started blending some more funding over at Pine Ridge, and also utilizing some of the 4-year-old at-risk funding there as well.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us some time to speak about early childhood. Dr. Anderson did mention my energy, but I did leave my pom-poms at home. But anytime we have the privilege of being able to speak about early childhood, it is with excitement. So as you know, Shaner Early Learning Academy opened its doors last school year and served approximately 48 students. And I'm proud to say that in one school year, we've increased that to 103 students. Our program is very unique in that we are integrated with state pre-K and at-risk. We're also serving those students who have IEPs and have special needs, in addition to being able to reach those families who may not meet at-risk qualifiers, but because of what we're doing at Shaner Early Learning Academy and Topeka Public Schools, they have an option of a high-quality public preschool that is all day. So if you look at the slide, of those 103 students, 32 of them are tuition-based. So we are really excited to be able to offer that as well. Another thing that I wanted to speak about is partnerships. We all know that partnerships are extremely important in what we do on a daily basis. And so we do have an ongoing partnership with the Southwest Topeka Kiwanis Club, and that partnership kind of varies. Really, it's just a matter of if we have a need, we go request the need and they meet it. For instance, right before the holidays, they dropped off enough gloves and hats for every student to ensure that every student was kept warm. So they just, do a lot of things to help us. They also were good sports and dressed up and came and decorated a trunk at our trunk or treat. So they are very involved in not just meeting materialistic needs, but also volunteering time. In addition to that, I am proud to say that Shaner has its first corporate partnership for this school year, and that is with Core First. We have teamed with their Core Mitmit group, and the partnership is in the early stages, of course. I keep having to remind myself and my team that Rome wasn't built in one day, that we can take baby steps. But what they have done is they have done a couple of fundraisers to raise funds for us, and because of them, every Shaner student received 2 books for Christmas, and we were able to wrap those and give those as gifts. In addition to that, every one of my teachers were able to purchase approximately $80 worth of multicultural books. We are receiving those in as we speak, so those will be added into classroom libraries as well.
Okay, so this is one of the most exciting parts of our progress, perhaps since we last presented to the board, and that is the use of MyIDs across every pre-K program. So I feel like that has been a huge accomplishment in making sure that all of the grants are in compliance and in agreement on using MyIDs as our data point. We have also then been able to move to a nationally normed assessment that we're using versus a locally created assessment. On the previous slide, if you'll go back one, Mr. Gowan, this is comparing fall to fall because that's our first and only data yet where we can kind of show progression over time. This year we did increase the number of students that were tested because we also added Sheldon in because we were able to write MyIDs into the Sheldon grant. So this assessment takes place in October, and that is the number of students who are not at risk. So we're feeling really good about that incoming data.
And Ms. Sharp, can you share with the bottom, because for those that are sitting in the audience, they can't see the bottom areas and what the categories are that are being assessed on literacy?
Yes. So the first one is one-to-one counting, correspondence, oral counting, quantity comparison, number naming, picture naming, rhyming, and sound ID. And as we reviewed the end-of-year data from the spring of 2019, we know that rhyming and sound ID is skills that we definitely need to be focusing on. And Ms. Broyles is going to share a little bit here in a minute about how we're going to do some progress monitoring to make sure system-wide that we are addressing that. Our math performance at the end of the year was strong. So those are kind of our 2 areas to focus on.
So this is math literacy and English literacy that the MyIDs are covering when you say
correct, ELA and math.
When you say the number of students not at risk, are you saying based on these skill sets or?
Correct.
So just so I'm clear, the horizontal or the vertical axis is number of students proficient, right? That's the number, not a percentage, right?
Correct.
So we're testing more students this year than last year,
Yes.
or they are more proficient. I mean,
I think it's a combination of both.
Okay. So do we know percentage-wise how proficient our students are, and have we seen growth there as well? I guess is the other question I'd love to know. Just
Ms. Sharp, can you provide a slide at a later time that gives them the percentages in addition to the numbers as we do with CAP? Would that be something that maybe might be helpful for you to have?
Yeah, it would
So we'll
have.
email you a slide that just has, in addition to those numbers, the percentages since the population number has changed.
yes, we're not testing 100 students this year, 100 students last year, so the numbers have changed. So
Correct.
this is good to see that we're testing more students,
Right.
but I'd love to know are we making gains with those students as well? So.
Sure, we can get you that. Okay, and then the next slide, in the original strategic plan, there was information about preschool impacting the F&P scores. So I just wanted to include that information so that you could see it for elementary. I think that with the use of common assessments across preschool, common resources across preschool, that we will, over time, continue to see that elementary data increase. And I just wanted to leave this in. This was in the presentation last year, but just outlining what the concerns were in 2002. This was some information that Mr. Kipp had kept, and just interesting how we had common concerns over time. And this slide, I'm really excited to share this progress with you. These were our next steps when Early Childhood presented to the board last December. And the ASQ, we have implemented the SRSS behavior screener. We are continuing to partner with Kathleen Lane. And this year we added Pine Ridge into that pilot. So we have Sheldon, Shaner, and Pine Ridge participating in that. And we're hoping at the end of this year that Kathleen Lane will be able to validate all of that data, and we'll be able to use that measure and that data point across our system. Progress report has been rolled out. Excited about that. We've started the MyIGDs and streamlined that. We are expanding our integrated classrooms and opportunities for more special education students to be with general ed peers. And again, that collecting of district data.
So as you can tell by the previous slide, we really have, as an early childhood team, accomplished a lot as of last year, but we all know that our work is not done. So these are just some next steps and goals that we have for ourselves as leaders, but also the early childhood staff for Topeka Public Schools. And one of the things that we are really wanting to do is build capacity and ensure that we are doing appropriate professional development on class training. And just in case you may not know what that is, it is a tool that really measures classroom environment, and so gives valuable feedback to teachers. So we really want to expand that and make sure that not only are we doing that for our certified teachers, but also that we're doing it for our classified paraprofessionals as well, because they are just as important part to our classroom environment as our teachers. Mrs. Sharp mentioned earlier in our presentation that we are working towards the creation of some common formative assessments that we can do across the district. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to describe that process. This year at Shaner, we have been piloting. What does this look like? Our MyIGDs data, especially with it being a nationally normed test, gives us valuable information, but we in 3 data points a year. So we want to make sure, how are we tracking, how are we monitoring our kindergarten readiness skills throughout the year? That's more frequently than just those 3 times. So in addition to the MyIGDs data point, Shaner staff have been approximately every month been assessing and watching foundational math skills and foundational reading skills that will help students to ensure that they are starting off their school careers with a strong foundation. And so we have been kind of piloting how that looks like, the logistics of it, and been making revisions this year so that then we can roll it out and really be an asset to all early childhood staff, not just at Shaner.
One of the other things that is also on our radar is we have the privilege of being offered a Kansas Health Foundation grant to support early childhood. This grant is $100,000 over, or $300,000 over 3 years. and it's about systems. And so it was a non-competitive grant that they have just offered our school district, in addition to several other school districts in the state, to support literacy and early childhood education across Kansas. And so we've been working with the team to work on what that looks like in our district. We're still in the sort of planning processes of that, but you will hopefully hear more information about that soon. But that is something that is also on our radar. Of course, I talked earlier about the expanded partnership between parents as teachers and pre-K. And so we're going to continue working on making sure that we have very nice transitions for our children, and that we're making sure that we're getting them all the information that they need. And we're also looking at possibly hiring a part-time person to work on our evening wait list for parents as teachers. Currently, well, I just got tons of new family enrollments today, so I don't quite know, but I want to say it was nearly 40% of our families want evening visits, and currently that means that we're at about a year for our evening wait list, and we're the only home visitation program in the city that provides evening families, visits for evening families. So we're hopeful that we can utilize some of our funding differently to be able to support a parent educator that can serve a lot of those evening families, because we know that those families also need the education and learning that parents and teachers can provide.
I wanted to add just a few more details about the Kansas Health Foundation grant. That is something meant to support Shawnee County and will be really facilitated and held by the United Way of Greater Topeka. And the intent is to impact literacy achievement within Topeka Public Schools. So there has been a committee of different community agencies coming together to see what we can do to improve systems within Shawnee County and Topeka Public Schools, prenatal to 5, so that we can continue to increase reading achievement. We are going to reconvene a committee of teachers and review teacher feedback on the preschool progress report. After using it for a year, they're going to want to make some tweaks and changes based upon what went well and what didn't. So we're going to get that committee back together so that come August we can roll out an updated version of that. We are working with KSDE to increase the number of integrated classrooms and looking at how the funding might be changed or worked to not affect our budgets, but be able to blend some funding and create more classrooms where there's a combination of students where we would have tuition, state pre-K, special education, all blended together. We are also wanting to expand the use of conscious discipline across all of the pre-K programs. That is something that can help support that social emotional development of students, and not every pre-K classroom has access to those resources currently, so we're going to make adjustments for that. And we are going to continue to collect and analyze the MyAD's data so that we can inform instruction and make instructional and curriculum decisions based upon the data of our students. So that is the end of our formal presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, ladies. I do appreciate your presentation, and we've been looking forward to this for some time. I do have a couple of questions. I know, Ms. Farley, you were saying that how you're making the transition from parents as teachers to pre-K. How are we doing the same as we go from pre-K to kindergarten? And what does that process look like? And then my second question would be regarding funding, because I've had patrons come and say, you know, the district's objective is to close this gap and to address some of the disparities that we have as children enter school. What are the opportunities that they have how do we make known the opportunities that people who don't have the same kind of resources how do they know which ones they can apply for, where those opportunities are, so that we can really address those more underserved populations of students?
Yes. I'll speak first to kindergarten transition. So we created a document that all preschool teachers could fill out with academic, behavioral, social, emotional information about their students and pass that on to the kindergarten teacher. I think that we can continue to make tweaks and changes to improve what that looks like. For special education students, the families are going into the incoming elementary school and having IEP meetings there so that that transition is smooth for those students. Dr. Anderson has been a big advocate for getting the preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers together, typically in the spring semester, so that they're able to have dialogue and discuss standards and skills and really collaborate on making sure that our pre-K teachers are helping get our kindergarten students ready for school. As far as accessibility, because really I think that's what I heard you saying, KSDE just released the application for the 4-year-old at risk for next school year. And this year, as long as your district is approved to receive those funds, they will fund an unlimited number of 4-year-old at risk students. Now, we've got to stay within, our staffing and the ratios, but that is something that is changing and something that we kind of kept hearing might change. They have to meet a certain criteria to be eligible for that program. Kind of like Head Start, they've got to be eligible for one of those programs. So I think communicating the many options within Topeka Public Schools for pre-K, it is complicated. And I think this year, when the families come into registration, we're going to have all families just fill out the registration form and then review all of that information so that then a phone call can go to the families, discuss the qualifiers, and hopefully maybe explain the options and programs available to the family through that conversation. We do hear frequently about, the tuition program's great, but we make too much money for the state pre-K, but tuition, is a stretch for our family. So hopefully as the state continues to expand early childhood services and can move to more universal pre-K, that's, a gap that we can continue to eliminate. But oftentimes due to the restrictions on the funding, there's guidelines that we have to follow.
Right, and I think it's good based on both sides, and that we're asking parents to trust us at that early stage, that we're going to give the children the best opportunity to be successful when moving forward. So it's just starting to address those obstacles and know that they're there, but then also clarifying what opportunities they have early on, because I heard this after the school year had started and they had already moved their child from one, and so just making clear what the opportunities are within the district. This is the last question I would have. You were talking regarding at risk pertaining to specific skill sets. How are we addressing at risk pertaining to ACEs, kind of trauma, as students are entering into school? Is that part of this process with preschool as well?
At Sheldon, they are collecting some of that information through their family advocates when they're doing home visits, and that allows them to get into the home more frequently because of the family advocate position, and that's something that isn't available in every pre-K setting. But they're able to really get in, know the families, know what some of those risk factors are, and then help them get connected with resources. And I think that they both have things that they want to add.
Mrs. Sharp can always speak as far as the district view, but I can just add a little bit onto that for something that is specific to Shaner. you know, we all do home visits at the beginning of the school year. And one of the things that we do there is the ASQ, and that information just pertains to kind of overall child development, concerns that the parents may have, strengths and weaknesses of the child, anything that may not seem typical. And then our staff comes back and we review that. I mean, we look at that social emotional point just like we would as a math data point or an ELA data point, because we all know social emotional is a huge component of any child, but especially our early childhood students who have never been in a school setting before. So we do the ASQs, we come back as a staff, we review, then we say, okay, let's give some time on this, but let's already have some interventions that these kiddos may need so that we are being proactive rather than reactively responding. And so at Shaner, we do have weekly mental health meetings where we review this behavioral data. We have spreadsheets where we track it. We have interventions that are put in place. And Ms. Johnson, some of those interventions are, we have a boys group where a police officer comes once a week and does that. We have a social worker who completes a play group, several of them, each week. We have check-in, check-out. So really trying to look at the trauma piece, really try to look at just any kind of delays, social emotional, and then really saying, okay, as a school staff, what interventions are we putting in place? The neat thing about the way we're tracking it is then that information can be carried over, kind of like what Mrs. Sharp was addressing with the transition document. That information that we've collected all year, we will be able to send on to the kindergarten team so that they will know, why did we put an intervention in place? What are those supports that that child needs? And what's been beneficial?
So
Mr. Woods? Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just be brief. I just want to add from the perspective of being in the homes, we sort of see a lot of different things, and we're dealing with multiple sort of stressors with a lot of families, as our high-risk families are called. And so there are several avenues that we use. We use a tool called the Life Skills Progression that helps us sort of understand what that looks like with each of our families. But a lot of what we are doing is just straight resourcing. A lot of our time is spent with some families is resourcing and family well-being and making sure they're getting connected to the resources that they need in the community, so that we can focus on the early childhood portion of our home visits. So I will say that we also use the Ages and Stages social emotional tool to help when we have children that have those concerns, but with families we're sort of really just evaluating those families overall.
So thank you, Mr. President. I would say, you know, my question was similar to Janelle's, and I think Ms. Sharp did a good job in answering it. Really, I just wanted to get you to say, I heard the same thing, you know, from KSDE. They reported it. We were conjuring up the grant application that's going out, you know, for the Health Foundation, that they're going to open up the 5-year-old at-risk, what used to be called that, now the Kansas Preschool Program, to numbers, and to try to start down the road of making it kind of a formulaic type of thing where you get the kid, you got the kids, you get the dollars, and you do what you can do. I think that's excellent. It fits right with our strategic plan in trying to set the stage for universalization of early childhood. We've already set that stage. So I mean, this comes in a really timely moment. So I want to thank you for your presentation. I'm almost hesitant to say this because I'm worried that everything I say will sound nostalgic tonight, but I do want to just compliment on how incredibly sharp the 3 people are who are standing in front of us. Who are, for some of us and for all of us, everybody up here, early childhood education has been a really important thing for this board. It was one of the reasons personally why I ran for this office. I thought we needed to commit more funds to early childhood education. It would be our, you know, research shows it's our best tool for eliminating the achievement gap. And just seeing you 3, of course, I know you all 3 very well, and but to see you representing and the type of things that you're reporting really are heartening and make us feel good up here, and make us glad that we are able to be a small part of the work that you do as board members. So thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Kirk.
Thank you too for what you're doing for kids. I mean, we know that it has to start with the little ones, the really little ones. So we are appreciative. I have a question. I was looking at the literacy readiness strategic goal 1, the Fountains and Fennell chart that you have up there. When I wasn't sure what it was showing, is this the results of the testing of the pre-K kids in those schools, or this is the testing for the
Elementary.
Or all elementary?
All elementary.
Oh, so that's not real helpful for us to look at this in terms of preschool. I mean, I was trying to figure out if this was, because I know we had some questions early on after that when we started looking at the testing that we were doing. You've improved the testing. We're now testing a little differently for the preschoolers, still using this Fountains and Fennell system, but on others. Because when we looked at it a couple of years ago, we were saying that when these children reach 3rd grade, when you get the state testing, that they seem to be way behind from what we thought they were based upon the use of this particular testing instrument. I don't know if it was way behind, but they were behind. And so we said, well, what's happening here? What is it that, are we mistesting these kids? Because I know it's a teacher-student, one-to-one kind of test. So you were going to implement something else. So when you put this on, I was trying to figure out, well, does this mean that this is the result of doing that? But it's not.
It is not. And we included this information because it was what was written into the strategic plan, but we've kind of morphed and progressed.
And we got better than just this, yeah.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
So now we have the IEDs to be our nationally normed pre-K, but hopefully over time we'll see that impact.
Right, we're hoping that they'll, I thought we were already seeing that the testing that you're doing is much more in line with what you're expecting it should be, rather than purely through Fountains and Fennell, so.
And Ms. Kirk, in the new strategic plan, we may well revisit whether or not Fountains and Fennell is referenced. It was in your past strategic plan before this one that we have now. And we know that those scores don't correlate to the state assessment, which is an important piece. Therefore, the nationally normed assessment that we've moved to will be suggesting to the strategic plan participants to include that a nationally normed preschool assessment is utilized as opposed to the past 5 years or so, or 10 years or whatever of the locally used assessment.
I'm not a great fan of testing, but when things were kind of skewed like that, I thought something was wrong someplace, and
We just kept
we
it
want to
in.
know how we're doing too. We want to know how we're doing our because really it's what we're doing that allows our kids to show up really well. And I know we do a great job with kids, so that was my question. Secondly, we have, when you look at your report here, it looks like we have Shaner, Sheldon, and thank you, Pine Ridge Prep. I was going to say prep and I couldn't go with the first one. But it doesn't indicate that we really have pre-K programs in a number of our schools. We still have some places we have. How many of our schools have pre-K programs? We know that for sure that Scott does because that's part of the dual language program. But so we have what, 2 or 3 or 4 there?
We have 4 at Scott.
4 at Scott, okay.
Yes, and every elementary school has pre-K with the exception of Highland Park Central, and that's partly due to space. And when we are able to hire and secure a teacher, then we will add back to Williams Magnet School.
Okay.
So that was part of our big deal. You remember, you were a big part of helping us do that too, that we wanted, in addition to having, obviously we needed more space if we were going to do more pre-K wise, but we also wanted a site at every single school as much as we possibly could. The students and parents get used to
the years of that school and their commitment to the school, yeah, especially in when we have our pre-K through 8 campuses, and we really want people to be hooked in to those programs. We see it as a real value. But what I was referring to is you didn't mention those as you were talking here, and I want to make sure that we still, I knew we had them there, and that we still were using those. So all the things that we're talking about here, our teachers are doing it in those smaller settings.
Correct, and I should have mentioned that when I talked about state pre-K and the special education programs, they are in those elementary settings.
So they're all included in the ultimate numbers that you gave us, you just had mentioned
Correct.
buildings.
Thank you.
Have any other questions? Okay. Thank you all. Very informative and almost what we needed to know. I agree with Dr. Mickelson that we need to know numbers
Sure.
on literacy readiness strategic goal 1. So,
I'll get that sent over to you. Thank you very much.
thank you. So next on the agenda is action item, Mr. Minke.
Good evening, Board. Coming back since our last meeting on December 19th, we asked for your authorization to begin work on the terms and direct placement of general obligation refunding bonds with our refinance partner, Capital One Public Finance. This has been a long journey. We started this back in September with our bond advisor, underwriter, Mr. Barnberg with Raymond James. Just kind of a replay with target goals of improving our debt position in terms of maturity, mill levy flexibility, and savings over the life of our current bonds. And I think we've hit that. There's 2 resolutions before you this evening, 1911 and 1912. And this authorization allows us to the issue and delivery of our general obligation bonds and to finalize the transaction prior to the end of the month. So I believe the actuarial and legal work has been done to get us to this point. And I'm going to let Mr. Barnberg go through some of the analysis with you of our final transaction.
Good evening, board members. Greg Varnberg, and appreciate the chance to be here. And as Gary had mentioned, it has been a fairly long process. And we first started looking at refinancing, even going back to July and June, when we started seeing a continuation of the decline in interest rates, and it really accelerated in July and August. But as we started focusing in on the refinancing, we really did have 3 primary goals that it seemed like we wanted to accomplish for the district. Capturing the savings, obviously, as part of the refinancing and lowering the interest expense, but then also shortening up the repayment schedule, but then shortening up the repayment schedule, but also putting the district in a position where you could drop the mill levy in the bond and interest fund. And I think you'll see that the outcome of the bond refinancing allows us to accomplish all of those goals. But if you take a step back even further and look back to when we were working with the district and you were calling the bond election and we were sharing information with the voters, I think it's really good to remember what we were dealing with at that point in time and what has happened since then. You were very, very fortunate in regards to the timing of your bond election because the state aid percentages changed in 2015 and you were able to get voter approval prior to that change. And at the time we were working on the bond election, state aid percentage was 44%, and that now has gone to 59%. And state aid is a percentage of both principal and interest. And if you have a lower state aid percentage, that means either you have a smaller project that you can afford, or you have more of the principal and interest paid by local taxpayers in either a form of a higher mill levy or just a larger percentage paid by local taxpayers. So not only did we see the state aid percentage go up from 44 to 59%, but when you compare that to what would have happened if you had waited a year, we would now be talking about state aid percentage of 28%. And I think if we were looking at 28% state aid at the time we were calling the bond election, that clearly would have impacted the amount that we could have done as a no mill levy increase bond election. And it would have put you in a much more difficult position to either scale back the projects or ask voters for a tax increase. The other thing that has occurred, and I think it was a function of the increases in state aid, you've also had some nice or better assessed valuation increases than we saw. The last 5 years have been better than the 5 years prior to calling the bond election, so we're starting to see increasing assessed valuation and improvement in that state aid percentage. And that's allowed the mill levy and your bond and interest fund to go from, at the time of the bond election, what was in the mid 6 mil range, down to now where you're at about 4.6 mils. And as you can see from the mill levy analysis that's presented this evening, we're showing that the mill levy can drop another mill to 3.615, hold that for about 6 years, and then you should be able to continue those declines going from 3.4 to 3.2 and then stabilizing at about 3 mils for the remaining life of the issue. So we're really happy to look at that, especially when you look back at where we were and the information you shared with your voters and the taxpayers as you were requesting approval of that bond election. But in regards to the results of the refinancing, it's also interesting to look back at as we were looking at interest rates and watching them decline, especially through the latter part of 2019. I think one of our first analyses that we had shared with Mr. Minke in the district had a savings of about 4.9 million, then it increased to 8 million. And that was in September. We started looking more closely at it because we had a pretty significant drop in rates in August and September. Then we started looking at some scenarios where potentially we could shorten up the repayment schedule. That helped also with increasing the savings, and we saw 16 million in savings, but then we also were starting to fight some increasing interest rates, and especially in the public market. And so the savings then had dropped to about 11 million, still better than when we had started, but we were a little disappointed that it had fallen off. And we started looking at a relatively new technique in the bond market where the ability to do tax-exempt refundings, advance refundings, was eliminated in 2017. And this convertible approach allows the bonds to initially be at a taxable rate, and then when the old bonds are paid off, we have it set where the interest rate will drop to a predetermined tax-exempt rate. And so not having to live with that higher taxable rate for the life of the issue allowed us to even improve on that savings. In December, when we met with you, we were estimating a savings of about 21.6 million. And I guess if there's any disappointing part in all of this, the final savings that's presented to you this evening is $20,442,378. Still well above what we were looking at through the majority of this process, down from what we had shared with you in December. And the primary driver in that change in the savings was that the estimated rates we were using at the December meeting had a taxable rate that started at 3.45% and then dropped to 2.62%. As Mr. Minke had mentioned, Capital One Public Funding LLC is the purchaser of the bonds, and this is a refunding that not every investor would be willing to accept, an interest rate that drops to a lower tax-exempt rate. So we have a limited number of purchasers. As we worked with them to finalize the rates, it ended up being a final rate of initially 3.59%, then dropping to 2.72%. So again, we ended up with savings of $20,442,000, off a little bit from where we were in December, but hopefully it's still a very good outcome for the district. And the other good news is that previously the bonds were scheduled to be paid off in 2044, and we have the final payment now on the refinancing in the year 2039. And so we've shortened it up by 5 years. And that still puts you in a position where that mill levy can drop to those levels that I had shared with you before, from 4.615 to 3.615. Probably will stabilize at that level for a few years, and then you'll be able to start looking at some further declines. And the average interest rate on the bonds that we're refinancing is 3.81%. And the new average interest rate, the combination of those rates that I had shared with you, ends up being an average borrowing cost of 2.93%. So not quite a full percentage point reduction, but locking in at 2.93% for the remaining 19 years on the issue. So all of the numbers now have been finalized. We have the commitment from Capital One to purchase the bonds at these interest rates. We have obtained a CPA verification, which is required when we do a bond refinancing like this, and the CPA firm has verified all of our calculations. And your bond attorney, Phil Wolf at Nichols & Wolf, has taken the final numbers, put those in the two resolutions that are presented this evening. The reason that there's two resolutions is that we have one resolution specifically for refunding of the portion of bonds that's the Series 2014A, and then the second resolution is for the portion refinancing the 2016A bonds. With that, I'll stop and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Woods, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Farnberg, really appreciate you coming to see us. You're always welcome
When you have good news.
when you have very good news like this. So just to restate, we are talking about a savings based on what we thought it would take to finance these bonds of how much again?
$20,442,378.50.
Wonderful. So $20 million savings, and we're refinancing these bonds, going to be a little bit under a 3% interest rate. Our mill levy associated with this bond issue is just over 3, right?
Right now you're at 4.615, and our projections show you should be able to drop that to 3.6.
Oh, okay. So, can you give me a dollar figure for the average $100,000 home? And I don't think we have any. For each one of those mills, that might be a Mr. Minke question. But what's one mill for us if you own a $100,000 home, Topeka?
1 mil for the district means about 600.
About 660,000 bucks, right?
60,000. 1 mil on a $100,000 house, 30-40 bucks.
Yeah, it's that's a good number to use.
Yeah.
So I think it was like, now Fan, I'll say I think I might remember what it was. I might have asked you for, insincere reasons, but I think it was like 33 something last time you were here. I say that because thinking of for a cost of the patrons to finance this bond initiative, we're talking about 3.5 mils, right? 3.6, and so we're talking about under $100 from the average $100,000 home, which certainly is a lot. That's a lot of money. I don't want to make it seem like it's not. But when you think about what we are talking about, $143 million worth of construction touched every single attendance area in this district. Every single building got an upgrade. So when it came to enhanced student learning opportunities, whether it was the new science classrooms, constructing an entire new elementary school that's state of the art. It looks like you're, at like a private liberal arts college campus when you walk around inside Jardine. You think TCALC. You think about all of the things that we've done out at Kansas with the bond initiative, and that's just that piece. You take the safety enhancements that we made that pay dividends, beyond anything I could really even describe right now at the time that we have. That's really what we're talking about. And the only reason we're able to do that, right, is because we have such an incredibly strong credit rating for school districts.
You have a very good credit rating, and that's reflected in the results you see here today.
So everybody would like to buy our debt, right?
There's a lot of truth in that. And I appreciate your comments, and it really is amazing, too. And I think back to when we were planning for the the bond election, we try to be conservative in our assumptions, but really to be here 6 years after, roughly 6 years after you have a bond election and be talking about a mill levy that's half of what we thought it was going to be and paying off the bonds several years sooner. And the magnitude.
No tax increase.
No tax increase. I mean, it is very surprising, but very good. And hopefully the taxpayers in the district see that.
I hope they appreciate it. So, I want to thank you, but I also want to certainly thank Mr. Meeky, Mr. Robbins, our entire administration for the great work that they've done to make this possible. When you talk about changing the landscape of an institution, in ways where it's going to live on for years and years and years, decades, for generations to come, this should show up as the first example in the book next to that particular topic. So thank you all for what you do. I'm just excited. This is my last board meeting, so I'm obviously being a little bit nostalgic as I look back at this, but this really is great work, and it is only through all of the great people that we have working for us. So especially for our new board members coming in, remember this, remember these folks who helped us get here. This is pretty exciting stuff. So, thank you.
I just have one question. Obviously, you've been very vigilant. Watching the bond, are all bond school districts, all bonds that go through school districts, are they able to save money by refinancing? I mean, are there people watching for them that allow them to save money?
Yes, and actually there's quite a few school districts that are doing the same exercise that you're doing right now. We set an all-time record low in the municipal bond market last year. We're off of that just a little bit, but still the rates are incredibly low. And it's a great time to take advantage of reducing your expense and doing just exactly what Topeka 501 is doing. So the school districts that I work with, we've actually got several others that are completing refinancings and using a very similar approach to what you're doing. So this is something a lot of schools look at.
Of course, they're not doing it as well as we are.
That's true. This one really stands out as a pretty good success story. So, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here.
We do appreciate your vigilance. I mean, obviously, this has happened more than once, and we've saved money each time. So, any other questions? Mr. Minke, you have something else you'd like to say?
No, it's ironic. I was looking at the 10-year treasury, and we kind of look at that every day, and from the irony is January 9th, 2019, it was 2.73%. Today it closed at 1.886. So,
that really is what led to this opportunity. And what's most amazing about that is coming into 2019, most economists, and I think I shared this with you before, were saying that rates would probably be stable. But we saw, at least in my career, one of the biggest drops in a one-year period, and we pushed all-time record lows. So 2019 was surprising. I don't know what 2020 will bring, but this is a good time to capture savings.
And you were saying, maybe it was Mr. Minke, that 75 economists thought it would go one way, and expert economists, right. and it's gone the other. So.
And I think they may also be employed too.
It's kind of like a weatherman, right?
Thank you.
Thank you both. So, ready to take, we need a motion. We have a motion and a second.
We got two other.
20.1 and 20.2. Does your motion include 20.1?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I move that the board approve the resolutions 1911 and 1912, covering items 20.1 and 20.2.
And we have a second. Do we have further discussion? Okay, we're ready to vote on the action items. So this just says 1911, so,
I added approval for May 2022.
oh, okay, I gotcha. Okay, thank you.
It's nice to go out saving $20 million.
So there was one last thing, and I know it's in your packets, the interest rate intensity chart. I wanted you guys to take a look at, and Mr. Rumberg and I were looking at that. We're not sure that there's any correlation here with what we're doing tonight, but it does look an awful lot like the weather radar map tonight of what's coming in.
There's snow.
With I-70 and snow moving in. So for whatever that's worth, we can't predict the weather any better than we can predict interest rates, but hopefully we'll miss some of that.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
So we're ready for board member comments. Down at the end, Reverend Williams.
Well, I just want to thank Janelle, Big, Patrick, and Nancy for all of their leadership, their patience, guidance, most importantly, their friendship, which will keep going. It's been a good run. Looking forward to working with our new colleagues.
Thank you. Dr. Mickelson.
I echo those comments, and I thought this past week, as I look forward to tonight, and with some regret, but anticipation for going forward, but things I've appreciated about my colleagues here. Ms. Kirk is dogged and predictable, I think, and very predictable. We know she's her phone is gonna ring at least once during the meeting. We know she's not gonna be able to hear something, but what I appreciate you most of all, Ms. Kirk, is your dogged commitment for what's best for students. You know, I think that's never been in question. I think in general, that's the consensus of us all, but that's when I think of you, that's what I think of. Because you've always put students first and want what's best for them. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's wonderful to be remembered for those kinds of things.
Mr. Woods, it's your political savviness, I think, your spokesman for the entire group, your eloquence in speaking for us, pointing out the obvious, especially when there's press around, is one of your strengths that I think we're going to need to figure out who's going to take over that role, because I'm not sure the three of us have that in us. But I remember we were selling the bond to the public, and there was a person who spoke, and I was concerned about his statement, and we were at Topeka West, and you said, oh, he works for this is why he's doing it. You know, you just understood the backstory that was oblivious to me, so I appreciate that about you and your willingness to speak on behalf of a lot of us. Peg, I've appreciated your commitment to fine arts. It was appropriate that Mr. Evans came tonight. Your improvement, I think, or your persistence in seeing that we improve our mental health of our children, I think is a large part due to your persistence. So I appreciate that and witness that, and hopefully we can carry that on. And then Janelle, I appreciate sitting next to you for a long time. I think of you as a historian. I think you have a wonderful memory. Just today you said, oh, remember when I did this? And I thought, I don't remember any of that. And so I appreciate that about you, your commitment to seeing equity across the district, I think is what I see. And to see a commitment and results where we have eliminated the equity gap for students who may not have the same opportunities as some of our other students is something we can take pride in and see what we've done. So again, I echo Reverend Johnson's words that I will appreciate our friendship more than anything, but wish you well in your Thursday nights back. So, and other nights too. So thank you again for your service.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that. And as I was thinking about this last meeting, I thought about the fact that I was a student of Topeka Public Schools. I graduated from Topeka High. My 2 children went to Topeka High, and then I was given this honor to serve this whole district and not only get to add to the governance of it, but really get to know the people and get to know the students and families. And that's the piece that I will carry with me as I leave this place. What Mr. Evans said, he did, Mr. Wood said, pass the offering tray, because he really did do a preach. He really pretty much summarized, at least for me, what this whole experience was about. That this isn't about awards, it's not even about accolades for our specific names, it's about the legacy that we leave. And hopefully that legacy is really caring about our kids and doing whatever possible, whether that's saving money so we can do other things for them later on, or whether that's building a T-calc, or taking the brave move that this board took to buy land that we at the time didn't know what was going to happen, but over time, with the leadership of our administration, not only were we able to get other partners that helped our children, but then we learned to appreciate that process of partnering, that we educate, but there's other people who want to help us to grow our kids up, and this is our most precious resource. So as I leave here, that's what I leave with. Just all the things he said. And one thing, the last thing I wrote down was, take what the district asks us to do and then go beyond. That's what we want to do moving forward. So thank you all for the privilege of serving here. I'm trying hard not to cry. I am a crier, but I'm trying not to cry, but thank you all. Thank you to all my colleagues.
Dr. McCarthy.
All right, before I make my final comments, I do just want to say that I had a delightful Monday. Chief Brown asked me to provide professional development for our TPS police I was speaking on the adolescent brain for 2 hours. And I came away just really thinking we have an amazing staff, and they were so engaged and had such good questions and had valuable things to offer me as well. And we came away with several ideas for partnering on having their representation on maybe some of our other committees. And it was just a good reminder of what good work we're doing, and kind of leads into my comments. I really tried to think of something profound to say tonight, and I just really realized we've just kind of said it through the year, and everything that everyone has brought up tonight, I join in and I'm proud of. I have a few thank yous specifically that I just want to make sure I say to everybody. I mentioned before that when I came on the board, I had 3 sons in the schools, and the kids who were kindergartners at that year are now graduated. And there were a lot of questions that came up with, why are 4 board members leaving at the same time? And the truth of the matter is we feel we've done our work, and we feel confident that the district is in outstanding shape. And if there's any doubt about it, you know, the testimony that we heard tonight about the excellent financial shape the district is in, the leadership that we have, these 3 ladies presenting tonight on early childhood ed were inspiring and amazing. Obviously, we still have lots of challenges to work on, but I feel totally confident in handing our roles over to you, and you would be the first people I would thank is the new board members and the remaining board members, and continuing to take on this challenge. And I feel confident that you guys will be able to do great work for us. Now my phone's turned off, so I've got to. The first people to really thank also are the students and families of Topeka Public Schools. I just love this diverse, messy, wonderful community that we are, and that educated my own children. I want to thank every single district employee We know on the board we could not accomplish anything that we do without the hard work, feedback, and dedication to children. Every day is a group effort, and it demands of us the best we have to give for the noblest purpose of all. Thank you to the voters for giving me the opportunity to serve my community. Being a board member has been one of the most rewarding and challenging experiences of my life. I recommend it to anyone who has a passion for public education for children. I've learned so much. It's made me a better mother, a better psychologist, and a better human being. And finally, thank you to my fellow board members. It's been an experience like no other to come together month after month for years with these talented, interesting individuals, all of us focused on helping every child achieve his potential. Along the way, we've shared many important life events together. We've watched each other's families grow, and we've supported each other through loss and illness. My friends, I will think of you on Thursday evenings. And I hope we continue to cross paths in the community and in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McCarthy and Ms. Johnson, Dr. Mickelson, Reverend Williams. You know, everyone's words have been so heartfelt and touching. I don't really think I have a lot to add to them, honestly. Probably what I'm gonna do is I may just actually write you all a letter and give it to you. I actually thought about, you know, I sat down earlier this afternoon and tried to commit some of my thoughts to paper, and thought that it would be inappropriate for me to say everything that I think, and not because there's anything inappropriate, it's because of how long it would stretch. So rather than shortchange my thoughts or feelings about anybody who sits behind this dais or the district that we serve, I thought instead I'd probably just maybe submit a letter to you guys. So accepting that, there are probably a couple of things that I do still want to say, just because as I think about it, I end up being reminded of, you know, it was actually 13 years ago this month that all of us are filing deadlines for, you know, 2007, January. Yeah, it was like January 23rd, something like that. So it's pretty interesting to see where we were. You know, we all committed to running for this office for all kinds of reasons. Many of the reasons, you know, pretty simple. For me, I know what they were. I thought, you know, we needed to be have a renewed and strengthen our focus on the achievement gap. We needed to focus on early childhood education. We needed to invest more money there. I thought we have a unique strength that many other districts do not have, in the sense that our diversity. We could take our diverse student body, especially when it came to linguistic diversity. We had such a heavy concentration of students who English was not their first language, their native language was Spanish. Those students, we owe it, obviously, to make sure they can acquire English as their second language, but we also owe it to our native English-speaking students to make sure they can acquire another language. And what better, more useful language in the 21st century where we live, and the fact that we've got a concentration of students who are native Spanish speakers right there. Let's do it. All of the culture and the, you know, rich heritage that's inextricably linked to that language, we were able to leverage that, and we were able to do it in ways that other districts can't, evidenced by our international recognition by the Ministry of Education, Spain, with our dual language magnet, and our recognition by KSDE, by U.S. Department of Education, all those things. early childhood programs, if I were to try to tick off the awards. But I can think of the ones that just since we've all been on the board that we worked to initiate. Very Beyond Magna Awards, LOSOS, Parents as Teachers National Award, that won. We'd be here all night and that would be inappropriate. But I also think about what we heard with the bond initiative and where we are in terms of the budget. All of that against the backdrop of what was the most significant economic downturn since the Great Depression. And we didn't have to cut one current teacher's job at all. We didn't have to fire anyone. Through all of that, we maintained our commitment to the arts. In fact, we expanded them. Even when we had no money and things were going poorly. Yeah, that's right. We figured out ways to expand them, whether it was our partnership with USD 259 to take over their evaluation department. And we piled that money into early childhood, fine arts, and visual arts. When it came time to build and do $18 million worth of construction on our schools on the east side, where we needed to be doing most of this investment, it was needed the most. You saw a big investment and a push, and actually on that side of town first, a universalization of early childhood education and a fine arts opportunity for every school on that side of town. I can go down the list and we'd be going forever, but the last thing I will mention that I'm really proud of is what we've been able to do with our partnerships with businesses. We knew that we needed to be doing more for our students. There were things that we couldn't do ourselves if we partnered with other businesses. And through the vision of our administration and through the commitment and hard work of our board, we got there. We haven't reached the pinnacle, obviously. There's a lot of work to do. But it is impossible to sit here and not think about the fact that we are in a stronger position than we were right now, 13 years ago. And especially when we talk about being in a position to compete in the future. We're there. So I'm able to step away, as Dr. McCarthy said, feeling great about things. Really, I guess my final point that I'll make, and then I'll wrap this up because I said I was going to be really, really brief, was... This is normal. Oh, this is not the letter. Really, I honestly think the most important ingredient, though, in how we get where we are is really all of you as the people. So, when I think about everything that I'm spending all this oxygen memorializing tonight, it really is only through the work of the teachers, what they do with students, and the work that the custodians do to make sure our buildings are clean and safe for school every morning. The work that the admin professionals do in maintaining all these critical student records that I would not want to have to be responsible for. The work that board members and administrators do, who set policy and those who execute policy. We know that it's really because of their work that we're in the position that we are. That is why I'm optimistic, and that's why I am proud to pass the torch to such an incredibly dedicated and talented group of people, like the ones who are all here, who are going to be taking these seats at the next meeting. So if I could leave you all with one thought tonight, it would mainly just be encouragement not to give up, not to stop doing what you're doing. As I sit back, it's easy, I guess, after you're getting ready to leave, to sit back and be nostalgic and think everything is great. And I know not all the times were as pleasant as we are. I mean, even some of our debate up here at this dais was not pleasant at times. But, when I think about it, it's really only because of you guys and the fighting that we did on behalf of children that has us where we are. I will be there with you even if I'm not at this board, just because I have two very selfish, vested reasons to keep fighting for the school district. But it has been my honor, been an honor of a lifetime to serve in this capacity, both with you and for you. this opportunity. And excited about the future. Thanks.
Ms. Kirk?
Well, they said I was dogged. There's two things that I wanted to make sure I said that are business. So, because I'm dogged. One is, I got a call from a parent who has two children at Scott Magnet, and then has a preschooler who will be going to the pre-K program, and asked me why her preschooler couldn't be transported like her older children were. And I said, probably money. I think that was my response, but I said, and the harnesses, but let me check and see. Well, I talked to Mr. Robbins tonight, and it is money. It is very expensive, but I think it's an issue that ought not to be totally forgotten, to keep it in mind as we progress, as you progress through this process of trying to meet the needs of children. Preschoolers need transportation, but it's much more complicated. It's hard for some families to get access to preschool if they don't have transportation. So I just think that's something that, it's one of those things, you know, stick in the back of your mind and think about it. So I promised my person that I would bring it up at the board meeting, and I am doing that. I can't do anything about it, but I think it's something worth keeping in the back of our minds as we are working on behalf of kids. The second thing is, this became an issue for me because I am unable to walk very far. I qualify for a disabled handicap sticker on my car, which has been a godsend. But what I found is that getting around here in the district became more and more and more problematic for me. And so I began thinking about how we are dealing with the issue of disabilities in our buildings and on our grounds. And so, you know, dogged, the last day, we now have an ADA accessibility review that has been done, and it will be continuing to be done. I won't be here to be dogged in making sure that these things are looked at, but it's really important. We had a really sad situation this past year where we had a student that we had in our classes, in our buildings for quite some time, and had to crawl on her hands and knees because she couldn't get up on the stage. And so it was so embarrassing. I thought, how could that happen? How could we fail on this student? Well, they fixed it, and now we're much more sensitive to those kinds of things. But it just reinforced for me the importance of paying attention to that. And not only for our students, but our patrons. We had someone come to the mic and say, you know, it's really, really hard as a patron to access your gymnasiums. You don't have much help getting up those bleachers. You know, they don't all have handrails. I can't do it. I'm on the first row in most of our places. Where are the parking? Handicap parking. So those handicap parking, you know, it's not really an ADA requirement like some of these other things we're looking at. So it's not just looking at it you have to meet the letter of the law, but I talk about the spirit of the law. How helpful are we being to patrons who try to come to the buildings in thinking about those? And if anybody unfortunately ends up in a wheelchair, that's about the only way I can get around anymore in our buildings is somebody has to push me in a wheelchair. So think about those folks. And we now have this little booklet here, and I think probably everybody else is going to get one, and there will be a presentation of all this stuff after I'm gone. But you'll get to see, anyway, you'll get to see it. So I told you I'm dogged. I am. I mean, the last day I have a meeting for these two issues. But beyond that, I too, this is a real teary piece for me. We talked about the things that we did for kids, but we kind of left out some of the things that we did for teachers and staff. And I was sitting the other night just kind of going through the list of things and the usuals, and I said, you know, do you remember when the first 1 or 2 meetings we had, maybe that first year, must have been after the first year, we were talking about health insurance, which is, by the way, a big issue that you all deal with. And I did not know until that time that our lowest paid employees had a totally different health insurance plan than our teachers who had a contract with us. And it was more expensive, and it was not very helpful. And I wasn't the one who said it. I think it was our former member Doug Glenn who said we need to do something about that. And everybody in that room said absolutely we need to, because we didn't know. I don't know if any of us four knew about it at the time until it was said to us. And so we changed it. They now have the same health insurance plan that everybody else has. And I felt really good about that. And we haven't had increases for 9 years in a row. Am I right? So it's been wonderful for our lower paid staff. And the second thing was, one day, I was trying to figure out and read somebody's contract, their calendar. An employee came to me and said they couldn't figure out which of the calendars applied to them. And I thought, what do you mean, employment calendar? And I said, well, so I sat down and I went through it, and I couldn't figure out which one they belonged to. So I went to Mr. Robbins and I said, well, how can we have all these calendars? We had 20 calendars. And I said, that's terrible. How does anybody figure out which calendar applies to them? Because, I mean, just small little things would make you fall into another calendar. And I thought, that has to be a headache. I mean, as a former administrator, I could not imagine dealing with that number of calendars in a district every pay period. It seemed crazy. And so I didn't do it, but Mr. Robbins and the department and his staff went to work, and it took quite a bit of time. I'm serious, it took time to figure out how we could get it down to a manageable level. We went from that huge number down to 3. It cost the district $600,000 to do that. That tells you that we were paying for things on the backs of our employees for years. I'm sure that it wasn't deliberate. We're going to get people, but I think they kept looking for ways to save money here, save money there, without ever realizing the impact that was having on our lowest paid staff. It took $600,000 to take care of that for 1 year. Of course, that keeps going, right? That doesn't end. So, but that was a commitment. This board said, well, we have to fix that. And we realized how bad it was. So those are, and of course on our teachers now, Dr. Larry Robbins was the one who really has worked hard for this for us and finagled it to make it all happen. Our beginning teachers are the highest paid in this county. And our health insurance is the best by far. Nobody comes close to being able to offer the health insurance plan that we offer at the cost we offer. So it's not just, it's the whole family we have to take care of. You know, we talk about the kids because they're our biggest focus, but you've got to take care of the caretakers too. And I think we did a pretty good job of trying to fix that for a lot of our people. And somebody mentioned today, we do lots of market searches, studies to make sure that we're paying our thank you, not our certified staff. Huh? Classified. I've been here 12 and a half years. I still get that mixed up. Okay. The people who don't have contracts with us. We do market studies all the time, every few years, because we keep hearing that we get behind, and we do. And we work really hard to bring that up. And when you look at it, our paras have more time with their kids than our teachers. Many of our parents spend much more time with our individual students than the teachers. So you have to make sure that they've got the best we can get. So anyway, that's me. I don't have anything more to say, but everything we said about what we've done for kids, how well we work together. We actually like each other. We like each other. I mean, we really do like each other. Isn't that amazing? And we make ourselves laugh. And we tease Patrick constantly, but it's fun. Because we really love him and we take care of him. It's fun. We have fun, and we take care of each other. And I think that's been good for all of us, to be on, working with this number of people, all 7 of us, that we like each other and we work well together. We don't always agree. Please don't misunderstand me on that score. But we do like each other and respect each other, and that's been wonderful.
Okay. What can I say? To tell you the truth, when we had 4 new board members coming on, I was thinking maybe I should go with them. I was not real pleased to have 4 new board members, but as I've gotten used to that, I'm looking forward to working with each of you. As I don't know you very well, but I've gotten to know you, and I think, well, I know Rich really well, way too well. But the other 3 of you, getting to know you will be a pleasure. I'm very, very pleased that Scott and John will be with me on the board. They are superb board members. And I want to make just a very short comments about each of you, just to tell you how you've affected my life. I mean, Janelle, you've helped me see diversity. You've helped me see, not from a white eyes, but from how important race is. I didn't see that until I sat at a table with you in our communication. And I appreciate that very much. My life is different because of you. And Peg, I'll always look at my spelling, my grammar. My wife makes me look at that. Peg, you're one of the smartest people I know. I have learned so much from you, and I really appreciate that. Yeah. Well, that's another story, but.
Somebody's got to step up, Mike.
Patrick, I've never run into somebody as young as you who has wisdom that you have. You are very wise, past your years, and I know I'm going to be seeing you in the political arena at some point, and I will be a big supporter. And you know, I had the same adjective for Nancy. I was going to say she's dogged in her pursuit of education for our children, and she is. But the other thing, you know, you all didn't sit in on some of the things Nancy and I said in. She helped me with my presidency, and I really appreciate it. You were there when some things weren't going so well. We had to do some things. So, with that said, I'll miss you all at this table, but hopefully I'll see you around. So I'm happy to take a motion for adjournment. We have a motion to second.